All right, everybody, welcome to our latest episode of Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets, the podcast where a former CPA here interviews various executives from finance and other functions to try to just give accountants advice on how to grow their career and build a business. We have a first-time guest and first-time function joining us for today, so I want to welcome aboard Ryan Polk, who is the Chief Product Officer in Residence at Insight Ventures, one of our main investors here. Ryan might have a better introduction there. Go ahead and describe what your role is. But welcome, Ryan. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation with me today. Want to kick it off with a little introduction?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So yes, my official title, I think, at Insight Partners is Operating Partner in charge of the product and technology group here. I'm relatively new. Previous to Insight, I was Chief Product Officer for a company called Carbon Black in the Boston area. Running product engineering, infrastructure and operations support, and a few other groups as well. Previous to that, I was the head of product for Rally Software in the Boulder area as well. So in the last 6 or 7 years, we took Rally public and then sold to CA Technologies. We took Carbon Black public, and then this last year we sold to VMware. So it's been a fun ride. Well, here at Insights, my job is advising companies from a perspective of how they scale and how they grow their product and technology organizations, really looking at that scale up category in the market.
Yeah. And we've had some really helpful discussions before this, and we at FloQast have been working on a new product line. It's something we've been iterating into. So you and I have discussed some product development philosophy. Would love for you to explain some of that to the audience and how you think about from idea to something getting in the hands of a client.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the classic concept of cash argument for product, right? Taking a product organization and building it out to align to that entire process and understanding how you really do need all of the different roles balanced across the organization. What I focus on and what my core belief set comes from my education background and my history. That you need to have a well-structured and balanced organization between product management, engineering, infrastructure, and understanding all of those different elements of how you build an effective product team, how you build out an effective engineering organization to scale, and how you then actually operate that across the business is a huge portion of what we look at in scaling R&D teams overall.
And let's actually take a step back. So because I was an accountant, I had no idea what a product person actually did. I'm like, all right, they're a product manager. I don't really know what that means. So could you just explain to the audience what a product manager actually does and how it interacts with engineering as well?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I feel like I never had an idea of what a product manager did either, but we learn over time. When you look at the product organization itself, of course, there's the traditional element of understanding the market, understanding the customers, understanding your buyers and your users of your system as well. It's really taking that knowledge and building it into a product strategy that everyone can understand and align behind. And then taking that strategy and turning it into action, right? Taking that strategy and turning it into features or products that the engineering teams can execute on. Now, traditionally, when you look at traditional product management, it's very much focused on coming up with that roadmap and kind of handing that over to the engineering team to deliver, right? Yeah. As we look to evolve, we've evolved new roles in the product management team that exist. Something like the product owner, somebody who is on the team with the engineers who are building the product and guiding that day-to-day work. So product management over the last 10, 15 years has become far more tactical, day-to-day, embedded with the teams and delivering in more of the product owner role. Whereas your product managers still spend a lot of their time with customers, investigating the market, trying to come up with what's next and helping balance that roadmap and talk to the customers about that roadmap and the future of the products as well. So you can think of it as kind of a little bit of a split of inside and outside on those roles, but you see a lot of overlap in product owners, product managers. I mean, even if we wanted to talk about product marketing, we could. In fact, I think we were talking about that earlier.
We'll get into that because it's kind of a different function. Not really. That's a really interesting role. But yeah, it does feel like over the last 10 or so years, that relationship has become really collaborative between product and engineering. And yeah, it's people kind of marching towards one goal. The concept of coming up with that original idea, that coming out of market research. Would love to chat about the validation process from there. So you have this idea, aha, this sounds great. I've talked to the market about it. What are next steps from there? How do you approach it?
Yeah. Will anybody buy it? And so
there you go.
when you look at, in some ways, being an early company, being a startup is actually somewhat easier to do your validation, right, on what you're going to do next, because your company kind of hinges on this, right? It hinges on getting the right idea, getting that product market fit, getting to a point where people are buying it. As you grow your product management discipline, you end up hiring product managers and people who are on that team who need to be focused on that same basic concept. Will people buy this? Will this drive the company forward? Can the unit economics of my plan work out as well, right? Is this actually going to bring in the right revenue mix across the portfolio? Now, some of that is having an understanding and being steeped in some finance and accounting capabilities, which I think your team is pretty heavy in.
Yep.
Some of that is also being able to run proper experiments. So understanding where you want to take the product, working with your engineering teams to start to drive that experimental mindset, looking at what can we deliver, how can we test our theories before we actually go all in on building a product, right?
Yeah.
A bit of that is also having the business acumen to go out and do a bit of that customer outreach, looking at the market, talking to analysts, and understanding where things are going, and building that marketing focused style roadmap. The best product managers I've ever worked with are a good balance between a bit of user experience research, a bit of experimental work, and a good understanding of the market, and being able to represent what you want to build as how it fits in that market. You have to have kind of all three pillars to be really successful.
So that's a pretty broad skill set. Is there a background you look for when you're hiring a product manager?
Well, I would say that, first of all, I tend to try and build product management teams over hiring product managers, right?
Could you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a Moneyball fan, right? If you've ever read the book, or
I love Moneyball for sure.
Yeah, and so when you look at building a product management team, it's not trying to hire the best researcher, it's not trying to hire the best person who is a researcher, a market expert, and someone who can kind of do the UX side of this. It's really looking at, how do I build out the skills of my product managers to be complementary? How do I then actually expand my product management team to not just be product management? So it's having UX involved in the process, user experience. Having a research team built in as well as you start to grow is a part of that. So your UX researchers help you a lot. Helping those people who are tactically working on the product side, those product owners, who can help me run experiments at a team by team level and put these capabilities into the product and understand where we're going to go. And so having a product management team that kind of encompasses those skills, I tend to shy away from hiring experts, people who are truly experts in the area. And I try and hire a blend of people who may be good at research, maybe good at experimentation, or maybe good at market research, and back them with experts across the company who are my subject matter experts.
Okay.
And really kind of blend that inside the company, not just in the product management team.
So at FloQast, for example, it's important to have pretty deep understanding of accounting to really know if a product idea might be a good fit. So from a subject, and we run into the same challenges, hiring a product manager who knows all of those things that you mentioned is really challenging. So where do the subject matter experts actually live within the organization? Are you relying on a different team, or is that within product?
Well, lots of times, of course, FloQast is not unique, right? You need people who understand the customer, understand the situations of the customer. Although I will say, from an accounting perspective, that is much more steeped in, hey, these people need to know the exact laws, regulations, rules, and things like that. And those change on a year-by-year basis. Sometimes you may embed those into the product management team. Sometimes they may be in a subject matter expertise team. Lots of times they end up in other teams, like your sales execution teams, sorry, I'm losing the term out of my head, but sales
And
engineering teams
yeah.
as well, right? People who are actually directly interacting with the customers. When you think of it as a regulated body where you need to have specific rules-based governance around government regulations, I would typically put that as a small team attached to product management, but they don't necessarily have to be product managers. These are people helping guide the roadmap, also helping us do evangelical work in the community around our products, and helping be that subject matter expert, bringing up your product management team to be experts over time. Right.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah. We're not big enough at this point to have that dedicated within products. So we do try to hire some product managers with an accounting background, but exactly spot on. I've found sales engineers are who we end up going to. Yeah. They're the experts in accounting. They talk to the customers. Oftentimes they're former users as well. So that's a great source of knowledge.
I'm definitely not against the blended product manager, somebody who's an expert. I think you run out of the opportunity to hire those people over time as you scale, right? And so you need to have a certain number of those folks. And if you come in as the expert, you actually need to learn the other skills as well. You need to learn how to do experimentation. You can't just rely on your gut and to say, I know everything about this, and drive the roadmap from there. You really have to have that experimental mindset to be successful.
You've used the word experiment a couple of times now. Could you explain how that plays into kind of the old way of software development versus how we're thinking about building products today?
Well, I mean, traditionally, when we think about building products, we would think of, coming up with a business case. Usually that was a well-researched business case that took us months, to try and figure out what we were going to invest in. We would then take that business case, and we'd get it blessed across the organization as to these are the things we're going to do next, right? This big chunk of work. We would sit down and as a team kind of decide how to execute on that. And we would think of it as, this is the big thing we're going to do, right? And that's great. If you're prescient enough to be able to see the future enough to know that this is going to be successful, why not go at it, right? We would then sit down and in traditional methods of even software development up until the late 90s, we would then execute on that as a big batch, right? We would take this big batch of work and we would call it a big project, and we would align it with our product releases, and we would take 18 months to get out the next release on our product, right? And that big batch mindset, it was really big in the industry up until the 2000s. Because of the inefficiencies in development, right? The inability for us to deliver quickly. As we started to solve the other side of that, right, where we could start to deliver quickly, we got to this, all the way to now where we're doing continuous integration, continuous delivery in a lot of companies. Cloud-based companies who are delivering hundreds of times a day, whether to production or to their own internal instances doesn't much matter, but it's that constant delivery cycle.
Does building on-premise software versus cloud software impact your ability to deliver more regularly?
I get that one all the time. What I would say is that you should have a continuous integration, continuous delivery mindset, no matter where the software lands in the end, right? And so I see a lot of great on-prem companies who are continuously delivering to an environment where even customers could pull at any point in time they wanted to, right? Now, they may be more advanced customers, people who are willing to deal with the newest capabilities, but giving people tranches to pull from. Or they may be continuously delivering to their own test, their final testing environment, and constantly running automated tests against that, preparing for a larger release, maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months or something along those lines. Practicing the steps is what's important. Making sure that you can get all the way there all the time is what's important. Everything else, the final delivery is just the last step.
Got it. Okay. And with on-prem, I mean, you're kind of asking them to install a new version of the software as well. There's that component?
And that's hard. That's certainly hard. And it's
shockingly hard. Sorry to our audience. I don't think it's understood just how hard it is to convince IT to just do the upgrade, do version 2.2. Let's go.
Yep. And this is the bane of every on-prem business, right? Is the not just getting people to upgrade, but also to get them to upgrade, from 6 versions ago, right? And then having to manage and support all of those different versions, right?
Right.
That's why you see so many companies going to cloud-based models, right? It's because they, from just a pure supportability perspective, you've got got more advantages. But when you talk about regulated industries, people who are running financial software, accounting software, and things like that, you really do need to give them the some form of flexibility on their upgrade cycle, and that's huge.
Yeah,
we
that
see
makes
that
sense.
in a lot of highly regulated flow control systems for oil and gas. There's a lot of these things when we talk about high intensity, highly regulated environments that on-premise software is still the right place. Right?
Interesting. So we moved to the cloud, and now we can do more experimenting. Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah, and there were a lot of ways to experiment with on-premise software as well, right? In the last 20 years or so, just about every piece of on-premise software had some form of phone home capability, the ability to gather feedback from what people were doing. You think of this, let's go to the simplest form. Let's go to an on-premise piece of software that you install. Behind the scenes, it should have some kind of really lightweight database tracking, where people went in the product, what they did, how they leveraged the product, how many times they logged in, and then a simple phone home capability to bring that back to your own system so you can get telemetry on your customers, right? Of course,
interesting.
there's
Okay.
an opt-in nature to that as well, right? You would allow the customers to opt in and out. And you still see this when you install something on your iPhone or something along those lines, where they ask if they can send back telemetry to Apple, right? So that is a on-prem mindset when you talk about telemetry.
As the guy just scrolling through the T's and C's and hitting I acknowledge next, I was not aware of that. So all right, very interesting.
When you talk about SaaS software, of course, we instrument every element of what you do, right? And there's multiple products out there that you can use to do this. But as much as you look at the beyond B2B companies, the B2C, the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, they're instrumenting every move of the mouse, every dwell, every stop. You look at B2B companies, we're not going that far, right? We're typically looking at what you click on, where you click, how often you stay on a page, all of those different aspects of how you use the product. How often you log in is actually a really key indicator to customer retention, right? How often are they logging in and how often are they using the product? And then you get to the more advanced capabilities in SaaS products, like feature flagging, where you can turn a feature on and off for customers on the fly. You get to A/B testing, where you can show customers different interfaces and test how they work. When we talk about launching products, we really do talk about A/B testing style beta programs, where you can actually roll out the product in phases to customers, and certain people see a view and so other people don't. And once you see adoption of those views, you flip the switch to go live with the full GA version. I
love A/B testing, but part of me, I don't think it'd be very effective for us. We just don't have enough users as a B2B company. Do you have experience at an enterprise company where you had enough volume to run good A/B testing?
Yes. I mean, you got to look at more, when you look at the rallies of the world, we had a lot of this, right? We had some, 400,000 or 500,000 users.
Okay. There you go.
Day,
yep.
Right. And, but when you think about even low volume A/B testing, right? Let's think of it as a different way. Right? Let's switch away from A/B testing and let's go to feature flagging, right?
Yep.
They're slightly different. They're used slightly differently, right? Feature flagging is that I deploy a capability to my customers, and I can do this on-prem and I can do this on SaaS software. Think of it as I deploy this to my customers, and behind the scenes, after the code's deployed, somebody can choose to turn it on, right? It doesn't show up. We don't see any of this new capability by default, and somebody can choose to turn it on. On-prem software, you use the phone home capability to download a little config file that tells you to turn on certain features. On SaaS products, of course, it's a lot easier. Then let's talk about launching a new product, right? One of the things that we loved to do at Rally was we would take let's say a new view of an old workflow, right? And we would say, we want to reinvent this. We want to get better adoption of certain things, and we want to provide new capabilities to the customers around this workflow. We would launch that new view at the beginning as a beta to select customers. We call limited beta, right?
Okay.
And we would use the feature flag to just turn it on for those customers. They could see it, they could give us feedback. Next step, we would launch it as a limited beta, or actually an open beta, where at the top of the screen, we would have a little button that says, hey, you've got a new experience here. Do you want to try it? And the customer could click that, and they then got control of their own feature flag.
Okay.
They would turn the feature on for themselves, and they would try out the experience. And we would measure how many people turned that on versus how many people turned it back off again after they tried it out. And then we would use that same method over a multiple month period to then launch that as a new GA piece of functionality once it hit a certain threshold. 70% of users turned it on and stayed on, right?
Is that a benchmark number, for example, or is that sort of a gut thing from a product to product basis?
I think it was more of a gut thing. I couldn't say that I had a specific benchmark, but we typically pushed it. If we saw the number hovering around 70%, we wouldn't flip the switch. But if we saw it blowing past 70%, it would easily, flip that switch. And so it was a bit of product management gut feeling in some of that.
Yeah, that's a lot of product management. Feels like a lot of gut feel to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's truly understanding the psychology of our customers, understanding the usage of our customers, taking a lot of data and integrating it, and then making decisions that are important to the business, right? And it's a great job. But it takes a lot of experience and has a little bit of stress to it.
Yeah. Now let's, so at FloQast, we've been, in my opinion, very iterative on how we've built our products, a lot of client feedback. For example, we're working on our most recent product. We actually announced it. Today is, what are we at? October 21st in the real world right now. So we've been working on a new product. We launched it to clients a few weeks ago at our user conference, and it's going to go GA at the end of November here. And the framework that we've used is we had the idea, like the high level idea, we want to automate a collection of data. It's a huge pain for accountants, so let's automate that. We started with that idea, and then we went and just had some mock-ups that were super high level, took it to customers and started walking them through that, and then understanding what actual pain points they had around that. And from there, we just started kind of building, iterating, doing little features that made sense based on customer feedback, with the idea that we'd be able to iterate into something they'd actually use. So that's kind of the Agile development methodology. Do you want to, that's the accountant in me explaining it, not a product guy. So I'm sure you can say it more eloquently, but yeah, could you walk through that process? And then my question now is, in trying to run the business, we're getting a new iterative thing, but we got to make money off this product at some point. How do I know when we can make money off of it if we're going to iterate into it based on customer feedback?
Well, so there's two sides to this, right? Let's talk about the iterative side first, right? The iterative side is that you're constantly reacting to feedback from your customers. You're working in small batches, right? Small, in Scrum, it's 2-week sprints or whatever. In Kanban, it's individual deliveries to the customers. When you think about those small batches, you don't necessarily have to take those all the way to production, but you sure should be getting feedback from your customers on each thing you're delivering, demoing them to them, getting feedback on a constant basis. And that is really the true value of both iterative development and kind of the cornerstone of Scrum, where we're every 2 weeks, we're trying to get feedback from our customers, driving that back into the process. The really great companies do it far more often than even every 2 weeks. That cycle leads to, is the complete opposite of what I said earlier, right? Where we've got this big batch and we've designed it presciently ahead of time. And it also, we find, leads to dramatically better outcomes for our customers, right? Mm-hmm. You see something that you are co-developing along with the set of your customers, you're getting feedback, you're reacting to that, and so forth. On the other side of that, from a product management perspective, we need to be prepared to think iteratively, but plan around a set of deliveries that our customers can understand and can buy, right? And we need to make plans at that higher level, whether they be these big initiatives that we're working on, or say a set of features that we're going to deliver to the customers. Those things we need to really focus on. What is the business value? What are the drivers for this? How is this going to impact the unit economics of our individual products? Mm-hmm. And then as we deliver those, how can we do this in an incremental way that delights our customers, right? And so you have to have both sides of this. You can't just iterate your way into revenue, right? You have to focus on a plan ahead of time that is then executed in an iterative way. And there's a balance between those two things, and product management has to strike that balance.
It's a very strategic role. And yeah, when you have me as the CEO on the one hand trying to say, hey, we want to do X revenue in 2021, and this product's a big component of that. When's it going to be available? Versus my co-founder, Chris Sluty, who's our chief product officer, saying it's not quite there yet. Wait a little bit longer. It's not there yet. We want to do what's we want to put something out great for GA. I mean, it's tough. So there's the on the one hand, under the kind of big batch model, I guess you can kind of plan around revenue a little bit easier, but you also have a much higher probability of failure if you didn't build it correctly the first time. Right? Conversely, what I've noticed is you deal with a lot of clients complaining about stuff when you're building it because you have this really simple product. It's going to be bare bones, and you're just, it's tricky to get the customers to work with you who are willing to deal with the deficiencies that they just constantly see every 2 weeks.
Well,
right.
You certainly need to get a set of advocate customers who are helping you, right, as part of this process. I'm not looking to just debut this to all of my customers all the time every 2 weeks. Although, opening it up and having open demos isn't a bad thing. I would actually argue a little bit the contrary side of that as well, that the more you open up and allow those customers to see what's going on, the more they get to see the continued value that they're getting from your products, right?
Yeah.
So at the very least, you're bolstering your net retention, lowering churn, because they get to constantly see that they're going to get new capabilities from the company. Now, net retention, if it's over 100%, can lead to new revenue, but it's not necessarily where you want to drive all of your business, right? Mm-hmm. The other side of this is that you really, when you think of it as launching new products, we should be thinking of this in a slightly different way. We should be thinking of it as, I have a set of features and capabilities that I may have delivered 3 months ago to actual production. They may not be turned on, they're flagged off or something along those lines. And when I think about that, I've tested that with customers, I've gone through the beta cycle, I've launched those to even existing customers who have them so that they feel like they have these new capabilities ahead of other people. But when I'm doing a marketing launch, I split it from the actual delivery. I think of these as asynchronous activities.
Okay.
And I think of marketing as, I would love to have my marketing team just be able to flip the feature flag and turn on all those features, and that's the launch, right? They've been there for months or weeks or whatever, right? And so thinking of this as separating, new capability, new launches out, and having them dark in the product, waiting and available and done, and then overlapping those roadmaps a little bit differently, right? And so this is one of the things, as I said, product managers are really good at playing chicken, right? To some degree, I wouldn't want to get on the other side of a car with one of them. But when you think of it as like, I advise a lot of companies to take like a 2-month stutter step and let your roadmap get a little bit ahead of your marketing roadmap, and then realign those things and really kind of think of them as asynchronous. I'm going to deliver these sets of features, and then my marketing team is going to choose how I package those up and turn those into an actual launch or a new product or so forth, right? And that method it takes a little bit to get to, takes a little bit of iron will to put off, for another month or two, and reset your development calendar off with your marketing calendar. But once you get there and you continue that process over time, you really do decouple the two things, and you can start to really think separately about them, right?
Yeah.
It's a fun method.
No, that's a phase of FloQast history we're moving into here, hopefully starting to formalize that cadence a bit more. Mm-hmm. Now, I did want to talk about, taking a product to market and what that looks like. And where is there a cutover from, hey, okay, product, we delivered this, now sales and marketing, it's your time to shine, we're out of it? Is it a collaborative process? I think it's a little different company to company. So what have you seen, and what advice would you have for making that work?
So I would say that, a couple of things. I hate to load more onto the product manager. But to a large degree, your product manager is your quarterback for a lot of these, you can call them go-to-market activities, you can call them commercialization, you can call them launch. There's a bunch of different terms here for what you're really saying. Your product manager at the beginning really needs to focus on what is their team. So I'll take you back a little bit of a step here. I like to take product managers with existing products and have them own either a big initiative on that product, some kind of big change to that product. That might be a launch of a new product, or it might be new capabilities inside of an existing product. Something that is a longer term, usually 3 months, 6 months kind of work, right?
Let me give a tangible example for the audience with that one. So at FloQast, we have our core application. A big component is the checklist around it. A closed checklist is a standard thing everyone goes through. We have realized that our checklist can be used for a lot more than just the close. We've had a lot of clients using it for payroll, SEC reporting, some other use cases. So with our core application, we're actually going to be creating new products out of it. We're productizing those checklists because they're providing value. Requires some tweaks, some additional development. The closed checklist isn't necessarily perfect for other processes, so we need to make changes. But that's a good example of a product that's already in existence. We've been working on that thing for 5 years at this point, and now it's like, okay, actually there's another way we can productize this and provide more value for customers. And then there's completely net new products, which are a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, exactly. So when you think about this big chunk of work, if you were taking this as a brand new thing, at the beginning, of course, the product manager would be working on the business case for this. Why should we do this? They may pull in a user experience person, also a salesperson, maybe a sales engineer, maybe a marketing person, to kind of come up with that business case. This is the why we should do this, right? Yep. And then as they own this initiative, and we start to get past the point where we say, yes, let's do this, right? Some companies are very formal about that. Some companies are less formal about that process of deciding we're going to do something. Once we get to that point, the point of the product manager doesn't necessarily shift, but they need to be the quarterback of a small team of people who are then going to take this thing from idea to development to market, right? And that group of people actually needs to include those go-to-market people much earlier in the process, right? So you want to think about your SE representation on the team. You want to talk about your marketing and product marketing representative on the team. People who are in charge of taking this past the basic capability and taking it in, training your sales teams, training your organization, and then taking it to market completely. We'll walk through that a little bit. So that team is core. And of course, if you have a smaller company, a team may be 1 or 2 people, 3 people, at the most. You might have just a sales engineer and your product manager, and somebody's a subject matter expert, right? That's the simplest version. As we're building the product, hopefully we're doing it incrementally, right? And iteratively. And so we're essentially constantly launching things, small capabilities. And if we're, using feature flags and so forth, we're testing those with customers, we're trying them out and so forth, right? All the stuff we've talked about. But when you think of it from a perspective of having that team then working on this, your product marketer who might be on the team is working through, the different plans around how we present this to customers. We're testing those plans with those same customers. Your SE on the team is trying to tease out with your beta customers, what's the value they're deriving from this? What are the key elements in talking to other customers who may be buying? What are the buying signals? What would they like to see here as well? And so having them further forward in the process, which seems to be the answer for a lot of things nowadays, right? The more we can get people involved earlier, the better off we are. Mm-hmm. The better off we are, right? And so we look at this as kind of the beginning initiative team, or whatever you want to call it, that is going to take this all the way through. Now, the product manager, as we get towards, after we've delivered the software, then is the person coordinating the activities of the product marketing team, the sales team, to do enablement, to do the technical documentation of our capabilities, and all of these other things that are aligned with your commercialization process, whatever you want that to be. Yep. And that's really is, underlying this whole thing, having a team that is focused on concept to cash, delivering this, and they're accountable across the team for all of the different activities of delivering this new capability. You tend to see some great outcomes there when you have that.
All right, so I'm jotting down notes here. I have not heard concept to cash before. I love the ring of that. That's awesome. On that note, pricing. Who is responsible for figuring out how we price this thing?
I was actually just talking to our head of pricing here at Insight, James, earlier today, talking about the overlap here. You see pricing in so many different places. You'll see it in product, although
Yep.
I will say that, once again, I overload the product people with all kinds of amazing skills. But unfortunately, product pricing is typically not one you see a lot, right? Lots of people don't have experience in both product management and product pricing. It's kind of a unicorn. If you find somebody, hire them. But we do lots of times build that into our product strategy process. Right? We want pricing to be core to how we actually build our products. When you think about pricing and packaging as well, how we present our products, how we reslice our products to be aligned with this packaged mindset, that is incredibly helpful. And so you have to have interaction with your pricing person, whoever that may be, people, early on in the process, and it needs to guide your roadmap as to how you build your products. So I typically put that as a role inside of a product management team. And the better you are at it early on, the better you are at kind of driving revenue as a startup. And so it's one of those things that we see companies start to think about when they get to like 80 million in revenue, right?
Oh, wow.
And they usually hire that person somewhere in that range. And you're really looking more at hiring that person at like 10 million in revenue, if not earlier. Otherwise, it's your CEO, right? Typically, your CEO is the person going, I think this is the right price. Let's do this, right?
Just charge more until they say no. That's that's our pricing model.
I will say flat out, I'm not even a great pricing person. I know what a good pricing person looks like. But a lot of product managers do pricing experimentally, right? We will test a price, we'll give different options, we'll see what people pick. And that's okay for a period of time, right? Especially when you're not looking to do this, big pricing analysis. But at a certain point, you hit this wall where your customers are pushing back on the value of the product. Your sales team is discounting like crazy, right? And you don't have these aligned pricing models that really give you defensibility of why you're charging what you are for your product. And so pricing becomes core to that. And then thinking about how you can take the features of your product and repackage them in ways that are more effective is also a huge portion of this. And that's why I put it all the way in product, is that it needs to drive the roadmap to be successful.
That makes a ton of sense. I can tell you, we do not have that person internally, but to plug Insight a little bit here, we leveraged Insight's resources at about 10 million of ARR. And it had been a swag in the air. Let's see, what we could do before that, but codifying it, having an independent party do research, run surveys, and talk to people who had decided to buy FloQast and people who had decided to not buy FloQast. The information that came from that was very, very powerful for us. We switched up the packaging in a pretty extreme manner, and it's been really, really great for us. So anyone listening who's thinking about that, I cannot recommend it highly enough to get an outside party to help you with your pricing.
Oh, it's huge. And it can have a huge impact on revenue. It can really be a big game changer for companies that prioritize it early.
I mean, in the example you gave, if you're looking at it at 80 million versus 10, like you recommended, that means you've booked 70 million in the middle. And did you leave 20% on the table? Could you be at 94 right now instead of, that's a really interesting thought.
Yeah. And when you think about being a product-led company, right, pricing as part of that product process is absolutely essential. And really letting the product drive opportunities along with the ability to convert customers is a great boon for companies that are building products from the ground up.
Yeah, it's one of the most impactful roles at a company. I mean, it's the software drives the software and sales, right? Drives the business in many regards. So our audience here is accountants. They have no background in product for the most part. I have to imagine quite a few people listening to this have found this to be a really interesting position. It's super strategic. It's cross-functional. It's fun and impactful for the business. Say I'm Mike from 10 years ago. I have a couple of years in accounting, maybe I got a year at a startup now. And I listen to this podcast and I'm like, wow, that product stuff sounds really cool. Like what would you recommend I do if I want to try to dip my toe in the water there and try that out as a career path?
Well, so I will say, well, look at my background. My undergrad is in psychology,
Yep.
and my master's is in finance. And so I think of people with accounting backgrounds, with finance backgrounds, are amazing product managers. First of all, right? Having that understanding of how a business works, the understanding of how to create a business case and really drive that towards a logical conclusion instead of I think this is going to be great, right?
Yeah.
Is a big step in being a good product manager. The next step in there is having an understanding of how engineering organizations work. And so I tend to, I've actually hired more than a few people out of my finance and accounting teams into product management across my organization. So
Interesting.
getting engaged in how the product is built in your own company right now, understanding the financial dynamics is interesting, but also understanding how they take the capabilities to the teams, how the teams execute on them. What are the underlying elements of your product? You need to be excited about that. And learning from those teams is a great first step. When we look at the roles like, your accounting business partner, your finance business partner inside of organizations, getting better embedded with the R&D team and how they work, being an advocate and somebody who's involved is a great first step in that role.
Are there any books or blogs or podcasts you would recommend for learning a bit more about engineering development cycles, how that works?
Oh yeah, there's a ton, and that's a long list. But when we think about the product management side, we partner with a company here called Products Labs that does a lot of work in training and how to be a product manager. There's other organizations out there. We really like Products Labs. There's other organizations out there that do this, that really do kind of dive into this, the product mindset and how to really gain that skill set overall. You think about different strategy frameworks. There's a book that I'm a big fan of, and for some reason it's falling out of my head, but it's the Where to Play, How to Win framework.
Yeah.
Playing to Win is the name of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great one from, getting that high level view of how you build a product strategy. I would say Eric Ries and the Lean Startup is also a great place to look when you're thinking about product management with a little bit more of a scrappy mindset, with the experimental mindset underneath the covers. Inside of the engineering world, at least getting an understanding of how engineering teams work. So anything on Agile, Scrum, things like that is helpful. You don't need to be an expert in that.
What's a sprint? What are points? There's so much small vernacular to learn in that world.
Yeah, there's mechanics that are good to know when you want to learn these things as well. And you can round that out. But honestly, the best thing is get involved with your product management team, get some experience, even if you need to move laterally or move down in a role, and then start to build out that skill set on top of it.
And I always like to advise, just start doing a job and you might ultimately get offered that job. So based on everything we've talked through, if I go back to me 10 years ago, if I want to get into product, I think I would have marched over to the product manager for our learning platform. Mm-hmm. Was one of the ones I kept doing revenue for. And I think just offered my help. Can I help with pricing? Is there anything I can do, just Excel jockeying to get you some information that would be helpful? I see how this comes through on revenue. And I guess that would have been how I try to insert myself into product and then transition full-time ultimately. But yeah, you made some really excellent points about why finance and accounting has good purview to be helpful in that role.
At Rally, we had a core value that was called create your own reality. And it was truly that, right? It's if you want to do something, go do it, and we will support you as part of that. And if you're excited about it, we'll allow you to transition into a role. And so think of it as creating your own reality inside the company. And the crossover is huge from a finance and accounting perspective when you talk about product management.
Yeah. Well, that's great parting words of wisdom there is to create your own reality. And if product is a role you want to, give a shot, just go make it happen as an accountant. You got to ask. You won't get it if you don't ask. And if you just start doing it, it might actually be magically dropped on your lap if you're doing a great job.
Yeah. Well, I have a great job here at Insight. My job is to help people learn about product and technology. So that if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to give you some resources to go to if you want to learn more about product management, and more than happy to connect you with people who are looking for product managers as well.
Yeah, and I will say I've had discussions with Ryan. He has only scratched the surface here. There is so much that goes into this, so I would recommend you take him up on that. Hopefully, you have some time after throwing that offer out there. Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you carving out some time here to give advice to the audience.
Yeah, it's been great being here. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.